Alane, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Megan. I'm so excited to finally be here.
Me too. I know it was a long time coming. Our schedules weren't syncing up, but we made it. And that's the most important part is we get to have a lot of fun today. So excited to dive in. But I have to say, I love what you do because I'm all about building businesses that work for your life rather than the other way around. And I think that a huge key to actually making that a reality is by putting systems in place. So again, I'm thrilled to have you on today to be able to talk all things systems and workflows. So with that being said, I'd love to just put it in your words. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your company biggest goal.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like the sexiest thing when you say systems and workflows, but when you put it in the context of freedom, which is why you created a business in the first place, I feel like it does get sexier. And that was the whole point that I started Biggest Goal. I was coming out of exiting my company and was bored in retirement and wanted to help build what I had built at my previous company, which was a well-oiled machine. And I thought maybe other companies need it. And it turns out they do. We're all good at something, which is why we started our business. And that doesn't mean we're all good at operations and systems and workflows. And so that's what my company does with Biggest Goal is we come in and help build an automated workflow, utilize a project management system. So you as the business owner aren't in the day to day and trying to grow your business and getting burnt out.
And you mentioned the word freedom, and I completely agree. I think a lot of us start these businesses to be able to have that freedom. And what's interesting is that you built this isn't your first company that you built. You mentioned that you already had gone through an exit, but you had the freedom to be able to do whatever you wanted to do. But retirement was a little bit boring. So you actually went back into the world, into the working world, and started something again. Tell us a little bit more about what you were doing prior to Biggest Goal.
So my co-founder and I started, it was a social media agency for car dealerships. And we ended up building two software platforms along with that agency. It, luck is one thing, just winging it is another. And we ended up we were so small, smallest company. We got this huge contract with 200 car dealerships. And then because we got so many, then BMW and Mercedes and Toyota was like, well, who's this company working with a bunch of our dealerships? And then we got contracts with them, and it just grew so fast, which is why I was forced to focus on systems and workflows so much, is because we grew faster than any of us were prepared for. And so I built that company for about 12 years or so and had the opportunity to sell and exit. And when I sold, I had to stay on for a period of time with the company that purchased us. They wanted our systems and workflows. And that was when I realized we had something special, that what I built was not the norm, and wanted us to go in and implement it. And I also saw and was reminded at a large scale of what it's like when you don't have those things in place, and the chaos and the employee turnover and all the negatives that happen when you don't have a standardized process for people to follow and have it documented.
Now, when you say that you were reminded, is it because when the company was purchased and you were merging with the other company, the company that purchased you didn't have the same processes put in place?
Yes, it was chaos. The employees, I felt so bad for them because they're doing the best they can, and they took such ownership of their work, which was phenomenal. But you have 125 employees all managing things differently, and no investment made in software to help ease those things, and no value of those systems. So when you have ownership of the company saying that they don't value those things, it's feast or famine. It was so sad. So yes, that was the reminder of like, okay, we're coming in, this other company doesn't, and a large company that doesn't. So it was really hard. It was very stressful. And you just see the employees and that just breaks your heart too. The employees are trying so hard, but they are exhausted and they are stressed.
I get it. I came from the startup world myself. And so with the startups comes a lot of pains and gains and learning experiences, but also learning opportunities. And a lot of these companies, that's when you're building these systems. And sometimes the people building the systems haven't done it before, so they don't really know what they're doing. And the systems between each department isn't really aligning. So not everyone's speaking the same language. So I think the language starts really from the top down to be able to make sure that it's streamlined against the whole company. But as you're talking here, I was thinking, okay, yes, it sounds like it might have been a little bit stressful and sad for you and for the employees that you were kind of witnessing this happening to, but also such a gift in a way, because it allowed you to be reminded of, like you said, this beautiful thing that you had created and that you really had something special here. I think that's the word you used. So let's talk about this special, like you had mentioned that you were kind of forced to put these processes and systems in place. What kind of forced you to do that outside of like just growing so fast?
We were seeing turnover with our employees. So, I mean, when my co-founder and I started, it was him and I, an intern, and one other full-time person. Like we were nothing, getting these large contracts. And what we're seeing is we had turnover. People lasted about 6 months and they got burnt out. But on top of that, all the institutional knowledge that walked out of the door, we had to start over with every new person that came on. And, you just, luckily my co-founder was the one. I had started with a binder. Like this is how long it was, 15-ish years ago now. I started with a binder and I was creating my own standard operating procedures for how we manage social media, how you set up a new Facebook page, create an ad campaign, and I'd print them out. And when we hired somebody, they would get this binder, but we hired all over the country. We'd have to mail these binders to them. And keeping up with a printed format like that was difficult. Social media changes all the time, especially back then. And my co-founder was like, you know what, Alane, I think we could invest in some software that could help us. And I'm like, okay. And we put in a knowledge base, so that a searchable online knowledge base, so that somebody could search and find the how-to on how to do it. And it was digital. So if we needed to change it and update it, it was always the most recent version. And we put in a ticketing system, a shared email inbox. And I'll say too, the shared email inbox, if I even sell this company in the future, I personally will always use it for managing conversation just between myself and my spouse, because it's so nice to be able to just tag somebody and not have to do email forwarding or, snooze an email or whatever it is. But those were the things that we just started putting in place to make it easier for the employees. The other thing is they couldn't go on vacation. They went on vacation and then we're blowing up their phone asking them questions. This client needs this. Where can I find this? Where can I find this? And when we put in the ticketing system, we could search and find the discussions and email discussions that they've had, or we could redirect while that account manager was on vacation. We could redirect their emails to another inbox so that it was easy for somebody else to manage that client. And so we just started putting these things in because we didn't want employees to leave us.
Well, as you're saying this too, the word freedom popped back into my head, because I know what it's like as an employee to be able to have to go on vacation and have to still be plugged in, because you're tied to like the success of this company in some way. And it's really hard. And like you said, it leads to burnout. So no wonder like churn happens, is because people need a break. We're not meant to work 24/7. And a system like this
Mhm.
is, it does give you the freedom to be able to still live your life, but still have the confidence that things are going to be okay when you take a break.
Yeah, whether you're the founder or an employee, like we need breaks too. Like, on the other side, don't you want to go on a vacation and the employees not text and email you asking you questions? Like you want to break just as much as they do. And I see that a lot where founders can't feel like they can't unplug. And it's because their teams don't have the accessible knowledge they need to continue on without you.
I completely agree. And a lot of the people listening today are either looking to start the business of their own or have already done so and are relatively early in their journeys here. And you mentioned that you put together an SOP, so standard operating procedure. And that's something that I think that, especially when people are starting as a solopreneur, you don't always necessarily think about. You just kind of just do. But it's really important, I think, at the beginning to be able to make sure that you have your processes documented, because eventually you're going to want to hire someone out. And if you don't already have it documented, you're going to have to do a lot of backtracking. So, what was your thought process when you were putting that together?
I was getting inundated with questions is what was happening. And I couldn't get my task list done when somebody else was asking me questions all day. So I was like, you know what? I'm the knowledge base right now. I'm going to have something else as the knowledge base. But even, I was already to the point of starting to hire when I started putting this together. But there's also a piece of it for yourself, for your own consistency. If you are making yourself memorize everything that needs to get done, that is stress on you. That is making you responsible for always remembering every single detail, every single thing. If you can document it and you just have to follow that process, you're alleviating yourself from stress, and you're opening up additional brain space for other creative things, like improving the process rather than just focusing on doing the process. You actually can improve it. You can be creative. You can be more strategic. And so even when I started this business being a startup again 5 years ago, is I started documenting what I do, even if it's a checklist. Okay, I'm going to do this. These are the 10 things that I need to do every time I do this one thing. And that way I could just go back to that. And then when I hired a VA, well, guess what? Now they already know the 10 things that need to happen with that, and I can assign it to them. So I still use it, even if it's just me by myself versus me and a handful of employees.
It's genius because, like you said, it frees up your workspace or your headspace. We can only keep so much information in there. And I know you're a mom. I'm a mom. I can't remember everything in my business and my child's life at this point. So I need some of that work or that headspace freed up to be able to just function in my day-to-day life and succeed, just to make sure I'm getting him fed, honestly.
I know children eat way too much food, I think.
Sorry, say that again.
Constantly hungry.
Yes.
Kids eat so much food, they're constantly hungry.
Believe me, I know. I have a little one myself at this point. I think yours is a little bit older than mine, but I'm already seeing the inundating and the, what do you call it? The foraging in the fridge. It's crazy. Anyways, going back to hiring the VA. So you made a very important point there too, is like you did get to a point where you hired that VA. So with your second business, at what point, once you founded this company, did you actually seek help from another individual?
I actually did it pretty early on, and VAs in other countries are so inexpensive. And so even if they're just freeing up an hour of your time a day, that's an hour of very valuable time for yourself that you freed up to move your business forward. If you're always doing all the little things, doing all this, then it is time consuming and you only have so much time in your day. And so I did it very early on in this business. I really learned how to utilize Upwork and other channels for finding a low paid, not a low paid, but just cheaper resource, and being able to leverage them for just a few hours a week instead of having to hire a full on employee. And so I did that very early on, and it makes a big change. Can I touch on one thing really quick, Megan, about our personal lives? Because our personal lives and our work lives, to me, it's the same because they overlap each other. So either you spend more time working or you spend more time in your personal life. And there's something that I always hear from individuals early on is like, oh, I'm not a systems type of person. Oh, that's not me. That's fine, but you can change and you can grow. And I think that's a big part of growing past just you doing everything in a business or you controlling everything in your personal life is adapting. I wasn't this type of person. And early on, I would have cringed. Making a plan, to me, I'd rather just go work for somebody else if I got to make a plan. But I changed because I saw the stress that I was causing myself and the growth that I needed to make as a human being. And that has bled also into my personal life. I have a travel scheduling checklist for every trip that I do, business or personal. And it's not what I need to pack. It's everything I need to do to go on a trip. Did I make calendar blocks? Did I book a hotel? Did I book a rental car? Did I book my flight? Does my husband know what I'm doing? Is my husband going? Do I need a care for my son if it's just an adult trip? Have I booked the dog sitter? All of these things for me to leave the door. What do I need to do? And my husband has to do the same thing. If he's going on a trip that I'm not involved in, he has to do this too. And it's color coded. It's all in ClickUp. That is our personal life so that I know who is doing what and when. And then when it's time to walk out the door, I didn't forget something, because then I get to enjoy my trip. I'm not stressed. I'm not realizing I forgot to book the shuttle to get me from, Cancun to the boat to take us to an island or whatever it is. And so I think, we need to think about these things as how do they improve my life instead of just automatically getting defensive and saying, I'm not that type of person, because I wasn't, but I grew and I changed.
Well, and while this is a little bit different than systems, humans are meant to have routines. Like, think about a child. I'm going to give an example of my son, but he's 16 months old now, and every single night when we go to bed, we have a specific routine. So I don't have a checklist written out per se, but it's kind of the same in regards
Mm.
to, like, okay, this is what I do, then I do this, then I do this, and he knows. So he knows that once we eat dinner, then we go take our bath, then we go get dressed and we do our bottle and we read and then we put on our sleep sack and then it's lights out. And he knows he's going through this checklist too. So I know you mentioned that some people might say, I'm not really into systems. I think that we all have it within us. It just needs to be reignited in a way that makes sense for us as like creatives and individuals here, because it is going to free up so much headspace to be able to just get it done and give you that peace of mind and comfort knowing that, okay, I can go on this trip to Cancun knowing that I've checked off all these boxes and my family is
Mhm.
okay and my work.
Mhm. Mhm. That's a perfect correlation with routine. And I mean, you're so right. Like if we didn't, then every day would be a new day and we'd be battling chaos throughout our day if we didn't have our own routines that we went through morning and bedtime and when we eat our snack and, whatever it is.
It's true. And think about even just getting ready in the morning. Everyone has a little routine to do, just especially when you're going to work. It just makes your life easier. You know what to
Mhm.
expect. You don't have to think about it. It's just this is what I do then, and then I go and I have a really productive day. So it blends into all different areas of the life. But specifically for today's purpose, I really want to dive into automation as well, because I think that not only just having these systems, but also creating systems that can run on automation is also going to give you a lot of that freedom that we had talked about from earlier and just make your life so much easier. So
Yeah.
let's talk about the automation part of your business and building out these workflows.
So when you have a workflow that you're using, and you've gone through the process a couple of times manually, then there's probably some areas that could be automated. And I always say go through the process manually several times because you don't want to automate it and then realize you forgot a bunch of stuff and then you got to go back and fix the automation. Like that's not helping you really. That's sucking up a bunch of time. So go through it a few times, and then some things that can be automated. I always, when we're working with a client, and I'll call it more like of a digital transformation, is we're looking for opportunities for automation. The very first piece that we look at is, do you have a project management system? And so project management system, Asana, ClickUp, Monday, even Trello, do you have something that we can base this off of? And so if they don't have one, then we help them get there.
And I'm just going to interrupt you really quickly here too, because a lot of these have even free components of their programs too that you can at least get started. So I think some people might be hearing this saying, I can't afford another system. A lot of these have a very low or no barrier to entry.
Absolutely. That's a good point. They have a free version of most of them have a free version. Now, to get the automations built in, you'll have to upgrade. And I'm always of the mindset is if it's going to cost me $30 a month to use this software, but it's going to save me thousands of dollars, or I can delegate it. I have accountability, it's worth it. And I could see, where you're keeping things really low, inexpensive in the beginning. Use the free version, start getting your process down manually, and then you can upgrade to using the automations. Is now that we have a structure, we have a place for things in the project management system, then we can look at automating. And that could be where in a CRM that you mark a new client as one. And when that client is one in your CRM, that kicks off new client onboarding. It drafts the new welcome email to go out to your client. It creates the checklist in your project management system. Do you know how many times, and you're going to laugh because it's very surprising. Do you know how many times that when a client onboards a new customer, that they forget to set them up to invoice them? That they are backing 2 months because they realize they never invoiced.
Wow.
So like that's one piece. And it's a lot of times when you're small, you don't forget to invoice, right? Like you want that money coming in. But as you grow, you're not in everything anymore. And that transition from client one to client onboarding and, oh yeah, you need to bill them. there's a disconnect there. And so that's part of the automation that we want to fix is let's create an invoice for that client. And then everything else, like there's going to be things that you do. Like maybe if you're a social media agency, you need to add them to Sprout Social and authenticate their social URLs. You need to, whatever it is that you need to do. What's your onboarding process? All of that piece could be automated, at least to having, who's doing what and when is it due, and have that all worked out for you. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it takes out a lot of that brain space, like the thinking that and the human error that we were talking about too, because we have so many different things going on in not only our business life, but our personal life, that it is easy to let things slip through the cracks. And I would say that when I was in the corporate space myself, I always thought that I was very routine. I had my system, but things happen. We're human, like we're not perfect, but leveraging this technology allows you to be able to really decrease that room for error at this point. And that sounds like it's not only giving you a bunch of time back in your day, but it's freeing up that headspace and really making sure that you're, and to your point, that you're also maximizing your revenue too, because it sounds like time is money and things can, like I said, slip through the cracks here.
Yeah. And being able to have that consistency, is every single client and customer onboarded the same way? Probably not, especially if you hire somebody else and you're expecting them to do it the same way you do it. That is never going to happen. And maybe they improve it. Maybe there's some things that are better, but you don't have a company way of doing it anymore. And you as a person, just like you said, like things happen and deter our attention elsewhere. So while we might have been doing the process perfectly from our head, we got pulled in somewhere else. And now we got to go back and we don't remember where we left off. We miss things, we forget things. So if we have a place to structure it and what needs to get done, and we can check that off, that's the first goal.
Now, how do you work on the customization aspect of it? Because automation is wonderful, but how do you still give that like really personalized experience if you are onboarding someone new?
That's a really common question. And so a lot of times what is being automated is the internal stuff, the stuff that the client doesn't see. And they only see that the process happened faster. So I'll give you an example of one that I saw for ourselves. Early in this company, we were doing onboarding ourselves manually. So it took about 2 hours for us to onboard a new client. The client doesn't care that it took us 2 hours to onboard them. They just saw that it took a long time. And that's 2 hours that we don't know where that fits in the week either, because we're doing a bunch of other stuff, right? So it might have been 4 days that we got to go through and onboard them. With automation, it happens in 5 minutes immediately when that client comes on board. So the client, their only reference is their first impression of working with us is that they immediately got everything. With the email, like if you have a welcome email that you send, it can be done as a draft. It doesn't have to go out to the client. So it could be drafted from a template and then you can edit and personalize it, but it just took care of 90% of the work. So that's like the biggest thing that I hear from companies when they're like, okay, we want to automate everything. Okay, well, you can't automate everything. But what are the things that are time consuming, that are error ridden, that are not consistent, and that it affects your team to where they're not caring for their clients? Because if we can reduce a 2-hour job to 5 minutes, we just freed up somebody's time to do more impactful, creative, strategic work, working on the client instead of administrative work.
And that work can be outsourced too, to, like you said, that VA to be able to, and they can just follow this simple checklist and process that you have within this automation system. So it's giving you as the business owner so much time back in your day to actually focus on the tasks that are going to move the needle forward in your business, rather than just kind of spinning the hamster wheel of trying to remember what you have had to do and things never getting done.
Right.
Alluded a couple times to like companies working with you. What is it like to work with you as what is it like to work with your company?
It's like unicorn and rainbows with sunshine, really.
I love it. Sign me up.
We wave magic. So what the process really looks like. And, I say that jokingly, but that's what we're delivering. It's like cloudy, rainy days of stress when clients come, and then they leave and they're so excited and happy. And it's such an fulfilling experience. But what it's really like is in the beginning, there is some type of workflow that the client knows needs to be fixed. And so our first step, nobody wants to do it, but it is the most important, is we need to document the process. And we use like Lucid Chart or Miro, and we actually map down, and we want to make sure we understand the process exactly the way that it is being done right now. And that can be a couple of stakeholders if it's not just you. And we work through that. And then what we look at is, where are the opportunities for automation in here? There's not all of it's going to be able to be automated, but there's going to be, a percentage of it. And we identify what it can be. Then we create a proof of concept in the software. And we use make.com to build the automation. Another one for your listeners is Zapier. That one's a really easy one to start getting in, and you could build your own automations to start getting an idea. And they have templates, so you could utilize something already available to see, how it could work. So we'll build a proof of concept to show how this automation will work. And if the client loves it and they're like, yes, this is going to work great, then we'll go and build it out for real in their systems. And if not, the proof of concept serves as a time for them to be like, actually, we don't like that. We want to change it. So, there's sometimes a difference between what's on paper and what's in reality. So we want to make sure the client really likes that way that it's working in the proof of concept. Then we build it out and launch it with the rest of the team. And either it goes on as is, or sometimes there's some iterations once the team sees what is capable of. There's so many times when I'm on a call with the client and I'm like, oh, well, if you're using that, then we could just do this. And they're like, I didn't even know that was a doable thing. Like, I didn't even think to share that with you because I wouldn't have even thought that that's something that could have been solved. And so once they start having more context, they get more ideas for improvement. So a lot of times either we continue working on improving that one or adding to new workflows and improving those.
Well, and it's always like you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes you get so much more perspective bringing in an outside perspective that doesn't have their hands in the day to day of everything to be able to take a look at it from like the 1,000-foot view and going through it with a fine tooth comb and looking for those areas for improvement with no judgment, but just for the opportunity to do better, essentially, because their biggest goal their biggest goal is to improve their systems and processes. And that's really where you're coming in. And it sounds like it's a very consultative experience where you are kind of holding their hand throughout the process and making sure that this isn't just, let's just whip up any old automation. It's really like, let's make something automated that's really customized to what feels good for your business, but what also is going to produce you the kinds of results that you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's sometimes where a client wants to automate something and we'll just be very open and say to us, it is not worth the time to build an automation for the value you're going to get out of it. Meaning it's going to cost more for you to build this automation and maintain it versus continue doing it manually. So there are some decision points like that. Like it's not worth automating. Keep doing it manually until it gets here. That's when you want to automate it because there's a maintenance component.
And so at what point do you recommend a business owner start this automation process? I can assume, but I'm just going to.
Well, they have to have been doing the process manually for a while. And there's some small automations. Like if you're using a project management system, like we mentioned, like Trello or ClickUp or Asana or something, there's already automations within that. So when you move it to a certain status that it creates from a template, these things. So at the very first part, create a template. That's an automation. If you have a template that every time you need to do something that you duplicate that template or you use that template, you're automating what needs to get done. That's the very first thing. Now, if we're looking at multi-software automation, well, you need software. So you need to be at a point where you're using software. You need to be clear on what is being done between all of those and what you want your output to be. So if you don't have several software that you're using, just use a project management system automation, whether it's, from templates or from automation built into the system itself. Other than that, we see some really clear things when we start working with a client is They're so much in revenue. They've got so many employees because a lot of times as a solopreneur just getting started out, you don't have the budget and you also don't have the pain points. It's not painful enough for you yet to hire somebody to solve those problems for you. And so we start seeing 15 to 20 employees. They've got clients, they've got revenue coming in to sustain a company coming in and building this stuff out for them. And they're using software, like we were just talking about in the beginning when you mentioned the free versions is, when you're just starting out, you're kind of just piecing things together, what's free and what you can use to the point where when you get to the point where you're paying for software and you've got.
Well, and this is one of the reasons I love having these conversations is because yes, when you are first starting out your business, maybe there's not a need immediately for your services, but I think it's good to know how to set your business up right at the beginning. So like what you're talking about, starting that SOP and documenting every single thing that you're doing. Like get even at least the free version of some of these softwares to be able to make sure that you are keeping track and things aren't slipping through the cracks. And a lot of these businesses are going to grow. What you might be a solopreneur today, but you might not be in a year from now, 5 years from now. When you do have these bigger needs, again, it's nice to know that there's people like you out there to be able to help them really take their company to the next level and really help them scale it to a more efficient system.
And we have a bunch of free resources too for clients, or not even clients, just any listener on here could go and use. We have free training courses, free process mapping courses, and they're short. Like nobody has time. And we also have my co-founder and I have a podcast called Automate Your Agency, and we just talk through how to do automations and how to simplify things for yourself. And that's free. So you can collect all the free information to start, making things sustainable for you because like we keep saying, like you start this business for freedom, not to work yourself to death.
That's the biggest goal, right?
Yes.
So, speaking of the biggest goal, where could we go and find all of this information, the free resources, and just get to know you on a more human level here?
So my website with the free resources is biggestgoal.ai and has access to a bunch of free tools too that you're welcome to use. And then for me personally, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So Alane Boyd on LinkedIn, you can message me, you can follow me. I love connecting. If you have questions about starting your business, I'd love to hear it.
And speaking of that, I always like to end the episode with just an ending piece of advice for those female entrepreneurs looking to kickstart their journey today. So I know today we talked a lot about systems and processes, but any other advice that you can think of for this woman out there?
Keep putting yourself out there, and nobody's going to find you if you're shy and not wanting to talk about yourself. Go for it and start your business. And not every business I've had has been a success, but I have learned something to help me with my next one. So go for it. Tell people what you're doing. Don't be afraid.
I love that. Well, Alane, thank you so much for joining us today on the Self Starter podcast.
Thanks for having me.